Okay. So the topic today is Hinduism. A loaded topic, complicated, confusing for many. We all have our ideas about it. Some of you may have been more exposed to aspects of it, and you can't get away from it if you've been part of the yoga community, you've been meditating, even in part of any new age avenues, other spiritual, you can't get away from it. It inundates everything. We'll get into that. But before we do, let's do some meditating. Okay? I'm going to guide you through a simple meditation, and we're going to do about 10 minutes, not too much. Okay? And so the idea is for this meditation is it's just a chance to get present, to get still, get present, tune in a little bit to what's going on, let things go, relax, and all that good stuff. Okay? So you're going to hear a ding when we start and a ding when we end. Okay? And in the beginning, I'll say a few words for those of you who may want to hear that to kind of guide you a little bit. But if you have a specific technique, go ahead and do that. But for any beginners or those who don't really meditate, I'll kind of give a few words in the beginning to kind of guide you through it. Okay? So just find a comfortable position, whatever you're in right now, just kind of commit to just being still for the next 10 minutes. And go ahead and start taking a few deep breaths, slow deep breaths. Just settling into where you are right now. Getting your body still, as relaxed as you can. Letting go in your mind of as much as you can, any things happening, any stresses, any things you have to do, just kind of put them on pause. And then when you're ready, just kind of sit back inside yourself and let the body just take over breathing, if you will. When you're ready, just let the body take over the work, and you get focused on really tuning into what you feel, what you notice inside of yourself right now. It's a simple awareness. That's the basic level. Just tune in to just what's going on, what thoughts are running through you, popping up, how your body feels, places of tension, of relaxation. Notice your general state. Notice anything else. Do you notice your heart beating? Can you notice your breath naturally coming in and leaving? You can stay in that place of awareness if you want. But if you're ready, now tune in with your mind's eye and place it right at your nose and tune into the breath. And just notice the simple act of breathing in and out. If you can, without controlling it, simply observing, witnessing, and allowing. And we're going to stay with this. And the idea is if your mind wanders away from what you're focusing on, if it's your breath, it's okay. Just simply return back to the breath. That's all you have to do. And just stay aware of whatever you can. Easy?
Good.
Good? Hard? So, when I say Hinduism, what does it conjure up in your minds? Or what do you associate?
Many gods.
Many gods.
Bright colors.
Bright colors, yeah.
I've been told like a way of life.
Uh-huh, way of life, okay.
Something ancient.
Ancient, very old, yes. Been around for a while. We know it's a religion and a way of life. Who here has any experience with Hinduism? Or aspects of it? Who here practices yoga? That's Hinduism. Who here meditates? That's Hinduism. Who here does any type of breath work? That's Hinduism. When I say that's Hinduism, what I mean is there were strong ancient traditions of those activities that have been in Hinduism for a long time and have been well outlined. So, what's interesting is Hinduism is really hard to talk about, especially when you look at it from the outside, because it is not simple to explain. It's not one thing. It's not a singular idea of a religion, like the way we think about religion. It's not based on one book that we can point to. Oh, here's the book, read this. Or one founder, right? When we think of religion, we think, oh, there's a person, a founder of the religion, and a book, and a series of practices that go along with it, right? Hence the term religion. Rules and rituals. Well, there are lots of those in Hinduism. Lots of people who qualify as founder status. Lots of books. Lots of rituals that certain segments will follow, certain segments won't, certain segments will have different sets, and they're all valid. That's what I mean. It makes it very confusing and very hard to describe. But on one hand, it kind of, I think why people become attracted to it, because they realize there's an element of truth there, that life is so diverse, people are diverse, it's a fact of reality, nothing is really uniform. So we're like, oh, what's going on there? How is that working? And I think that's what kind of brings a lot of people in to understand what is happening here with what we call this religion. So let's back up a little bit and kind of just talk about the word itself and kind of bring in a little bit of history, and then we'll kind of pull it apart. And my take of it is, I don't come from outside of it. That's the thing. I come from inside of it, right? It's my container that I grew up in. So I have a very different perspective than any of you here, and most people, who aren't raised in the container of Hinduism. It's the third most popular religion of the world, behind Christianity and Islam. Over 1 billion, right, practitioners of Hinduism. That's a lot of people. Mostly in India, yes. But because I come from within the container, and because I've been raised here, within another container of the Western mindset, the Christian mindset, I read the Bible, I went to Catholic school for 5th through 8th grade. So I was exposed to the Christian container that all of you guys are familiar with, if not in anymore, probably out or have changed, or you wouldn't be here today. So I've been able to kind of layer that on top of the container I grew up in my own home, which gives me kind of a unique perspective and a way to describe, the whole gist of this idea of Hinduism. And what I'm going to really do is, Hinduism is like a tree. It's like a big, massive tree with a lot of fruit hanging down. I'm going to pull off, by the end of today, very specific fruit that, in my opinion, are very important and helpful to us. To kind of leave you with that, right? And so, but the issue is, it's a massive tree. So we're trying to describe a massive tree that is, in reality, more complicated, bigger, and older than any religion on the planet, any organized religion that we have now. When the Old Testament was being formulated, the Vedas were old by then. The philosophy of essential Hinduism was already kind of there, way before the Old Testament was even organized. Think about that.
It's the oldest spiritual book.
It is the oldest intact spiritual, writing we have still available to us. The Vedas, Vedas, which means knowledge, essentially. And so, that is kind of the source material, the beginning of what's called Hinduism. Those are the roots, if you will, to the tree. And the Vedas itself are a completely different rabbit hole and topic, because they are so old, we don't know how old they are. And if you open up a history book, you'll see dates to the Vedas, but they try to pigeonhole the Veda dates to make sense of it. Okay? Usually around, you'll see the oldest reference to maybe 1500 BC, all the way up to like 300, 200 BC, is where they kind of have to place it to make sense of it. So otherwise, it usually doesn't make sense. And that's because in the Vedas itself, there's information and commentary and references to things that shouldn't be based on the time period. A lot of geographical material of the local area, the people themselves, there's commentary of things that shouldn't be. And so that confuses people. There's references to river systems in the Vedas, the Saraswati River, an ancient riverbed in the northern India plain near the Indus Valley that is gone now, right? It's been extinct for the last 5,000 years. But we know it's there based on satellite imaging. There's ancient riverbeds in that area that exactly corresponds to what was described in the Vedas. And not just that, they describe it as this raging, roaring river system that the entire Vedic civilization was founded on. It's that important. It's the premier river system that the whole civilization is founded on, that's written about in the Vedas. The problem is, it was gone by 5000 BC. Like, physically gone. So you kind of see now what we're dealing with in terms of archaeology and history. So, let me not dwell there because I could stay there forever. So coming back now, Hinduism, like I tell people, if you could combine, it's kind of the best way to describe it, if you can combine all the religions you know in the West, okay? All the forms of Christianity, from the Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, Catholicism, all of the Protestant denominations we have, okay? Combine it with Islam and all the denominations they have, with Judaism, obviously, full intact Judaism, combine it with the Greek philosophers, right? Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. Combine it with the Greek and Norse mythologies. What do you get? It's a lot, right? That's Hinduism.
It just absorbs and accepts every path, and it's.
Well, that, yes, the nature of it. But to understand kind of the extent of it, that's what it is. Which means there's almost everything in there that you can find if you're looking for it. Which is what's remarkable. So, the word Hindu comes from the Persian description for the landmass near the river Sindhu, which is another river in the Indus River location. So they would describe the people in that area as Sindhus. And then the Greeks changed that to Hindu. The people of the Hind, the Hindu people, Hindustan, right? It became that designation. And that's what the British had, adopted when they came into India and kind of used that to describe everyone there who weren't Muslim. Because remember, India has the largest Muslim population on the planet as well, which is kind of mind-blowing. There are more Muslims in India than anywhere else, any other country, as far as I know. Somebody can fact check me on that. But that's what ended up being the description for the massive variety of practices, belief systems, philosophies that we call Hinduism today. Okay, so that's how we're starting from. Okay, are we already overwhelmed? Okay, so hang with me, because we're going to pull this apart. So, now, in that hodgepodge of a salad bowl that we have, everything thrown in, well, to make sense of it, the idea is that in the subcontinent of India, they've been investigating consciousness in the nature of our place in the universe, God, the soul, afterlife, and kind of a unique aspect of it, the how-to, which is very interesting, kind of a unique aspect of Hinduism and related religions like Buddhism and Jainism, in a sense, but the how-to go about with direct experience, not just belief, which is kind of interesting here. You could really say there's no dogma in Hinduism. It's kind of a big statement to make, right? Because when we think of religion, we think of, okay, there's dogma. You're told what to believe. Here's how it is. Believe this. If you believe it, you're in. If not, you're out. And then we fight over it and we argue. Who's more right? In the generality, totality of Hinduism, you do not have that. In the microcosm of Hinduism, and when you hone in on different parts, you do have that. Okay, you've got different sects and segments and groups who are arguing, yes, because they get dogmatic about their subset of beliefs within Hinduism. Sure, you have that. But in a generality, there's no dogma. Why? Because like I said, for thousands of years, and we can say just for simplicity, for the past 5,000 years in Hinduism, in my personal opinion, it's even longer than that, but 5,000 years in India, they've been investigating consciousness, reality, the inner journey, God, soul, the best ways of how to uncover and experience these aspects of reality. And what they've come up with is a lot of different ways of looking at it. And that's what pulls Hinduism apart from any other religion, where they literally say, it's a choose your own adventure. You can pick your path. And you're like, well, wait a minute. Okay, great, but where are we going? And they say, well, look, where you're going is universal. Because, well, we do start with some of the basic premises that are the universal premises to just living, right? We know we're conscious. If you've got a spiritual bent, any level of awakening, you understand there's a greater reality to consciousness. I'm just not my body, right? Everyone here kind of already knows that. You're just not your body and your thoughts. So you know there's a greater consciousness. And that's universal, right? That's not even religious in a sense. Although religion takes it and goes and runs with it. But, of course, the hardcore materialist scientist won't go there. You know, that's the big divide that you can have from a non-religious point of view. And so, the nature of consciousness, which means, does consciousness exist after death? Is the bigger question then, the ultimate question, most realistic, fundamental question. What happens when you die? And so everyone other than the materialist tries to seek an answer, usually. But for the materialist, it's over. There's no more answer. It ends at the last breath. Okay. But if you dive into the nature of consciousness, well then, there's a lot more to disentangle. And that's where, religions step in. Of course, Hinduism has been exploring that forever, which then brings in the idea of God. Right? The ultimate dilemma we all are sitting with. Of course, that's what religion is focused on, the relationship to God. But as has been every indigenous culture on the planet since the beginning, their relationship to something greater. Right? If you have any spiritual bent, you know there's something greater. You can feel it. And you strive for it, you seek it, you try to make sense of it. Right? So that's what they've been exploring. So that's really what they're starting with, which is kind of basic fundamental. There's consciousness. It's beyond the body and the mind. It connects to something greater. So there's a continuity after death, somehow. Okay, let's explore that. And that's the beginning of Hinduism, essentially. Right? And that's what I mean. It's a universal framework. And it's the beginning of every religion, yes. But Hinduism holds that, though, intact throughout, which is very unique, is the thing. Every thread, everywhere we go today in Hinduism, it still can be traced back to those fundamental ideas. What is consciousness? What happens after death? How do we connect it to something greater? Right? And how do we live it, really? What do we do as we're living with these answers? And that's what religion tries to answer, as is Hinduism. But again, Hinduism gives you so many options. Okay. Now, the reason I threw in the Greek philosophers, if we understand all of religion, is because in Hinduism, there is a basis, foundation of philosophy that permeates all of it. What in religion is called theology, right? The understanding, the knowing of God and what that means. So, of course, Hinduism is based on that. Being a religion, God is central. Now, one fruit I'm going to pull off the tree, like I talked about in the beginning, and hold, is the Hindu idea of God is really, really helpful. No matter what religion you come from, no matter how you see things, the Hindu conception of God explains so much, and it helps explain everything else. And I'll explain that in a minute. And so what I mean by that is, just starting off with a bang, and with the idea of God, because that is kind of really the central thesis to all religions. When Hinduism, like I said, they've been investigating this for thousands of years. And they attribute these core set of figures historically for doing this. The rishis, the ancient sages, as they're referred to. And they attribute them as the authors of some of the foundational books that a lot of this is based on, that we still have, where these sages are talking. They're philosophizing and expressing their thoughts and their direct experiences, especially in these inner meditative states that they uncover. And they're saying the same thing, again and again, which is God is everything. There just is. Reality is that greater. But they don't stop there, which is now what's interesting. They go deeper, which is really helpful to us. And that's one of the massive fruits of this tree of Hinduism that we can take away, is this deeper understanding of God that helps make sense of the confusion of God that we usually find in the Western world, where they're arguing over God, even the name of God, where the Hindu would be like, what's wrong with you? Why are you wasting energy over that? That's always been the case in Hinduism. But within Hinduism, yes, there are people who do fight over the name of God still, because they're human. Okay. But getting back to the general idea of Hinduism is God is termed Brahman, B-R-A-H-M-A-N, is the central word that they designate as God. But when they describe it, God is given specific characteristics. Obviously, right? Every religion gives God characteristics. Well, in Hinduism, they give God the characteristics. The best description is what's commonly brought up in the older works is Sach, Chit, Ananda. That term, Sat, Chit, Ananda. 3 Sanskrit words combined together, which is meant to give you an idea of God. Because they still say, you still can't know it. But if you want to put words to it, here, take these 3 words, put them together, and this will give you an idea. So what does it mean? Sat simply means existence. It exists. It is. Okay. Can't argue with that. It just is. Which means it's beyond time, it's eternal, no beginning, no end. It is. Sat. Chit means consciousness. Which, how do we understand? It's got intelligence, it's got wisdom, there's a direction, there's a cosmic intelligence behind this existence. Okay. It's kind of universal. Ananda, which means, that's a common word. Some of you may know. Bliss. Or, in the Christian word, it's good. God is good. So, the idea is, this is how some of the original descriptions of Brahman is. An all-pervading consciousness that embodies what we're all striving for. What we would call all the good things in life. Okay. They go a step further now. They're like, okay, fine. Can you relate to this? And most of us are, no. How do you relate to that? We can think about it, we can talk about it, right? Put words to it, we can imagine. But what do you do with that? Well, the ancient Hindu was like, exactly, what do you do with that? Well, you can't do anything with that. Except write stories and maybe write poetry and imagine. Okay, therefore, we take the next step. What happens next? And now we start getting into the cosmology of Hinduism and how they describe what happens next. Once you have this Brahman, then to help us understand the idea of the Brahman, it is this unmanifested matrix of all things, using more kind of modern language, right? And that's kind of how a lot of us think about when most people who are not religious and you don't buy into the full materialistic model of the world kind of sit with this, especially if you love Star Wars. You kind of sit with this. Okay, God can be like all that is, maybe this energy, this matrix, beyond this matrix, it's just fundamental reality. Okay, It's maybe something like that. Am I right? In general, we kind of go with that. But like I said, that's kind of unrelatable. Physics is trying to figure it out. Right? Unified theory is this whole idea in physics. They're trying to prove that, actually. That there is this fundamental matrix of all things, from which all things come from and go to, and is part of. Very interesting, right? Einstein believed in that. Fascinating. Newton did too. And the list goes on and on. So the point is, in Hinduism, they were saying that at the beginning. Okay, yeah, there's this fundamental reality of all things. But the next step is the manifestation of it is what we're dealing with. Creation. Cosmos, universe. And in Hinduism, there's universes. Not just one universe, right? But there's the multiverse. All of creation is emanating from the unmanifest source. Okay, now, what's fun in Hinduism, they start giving it some names now to help us relate. Okay, good. Now, let's make this relatable. From Brahman, which we can't even talk about, which holds everything and is nothing, all at the same time, to think about creation, we got to think about something that's created from something that's holding the creation. Right? The container and what's being created. So now they go, okay, so the creative principle now, they give it a term. The manifesting God. The unmanifest God. Both are still Brahman. You guys follow? But now, within Brahman, there's the unmanifesting God, who's holding the container, the manifesting God. They give it names. Nirguna Brahman, Saguna Brahman. You see? You follow so far? Okay, this is still philosophy, I know. But they don't stop there. Because again, it's still philosophy. Like, okay, what do you do with this? Well, we put aside the unmanifest Brahman, because that's still unrelatable for most humans. The Saguna Brahman now becomes relatable. Now the Saguna Brahman takes the Ishwar term, the personal God, the relatable God that we can connect to. Oh, okay, interesting. Now we're getting a little religious here. But they don't stop there. They go, okay, we give it a term, the Ishwar, personal God. Now you can choose, because they're all true. So here's where we get into now, in Hinduism, when you open up a book of Hinduism or Wikipedia, they describe, they believe in these gods, there's this God, this God, this God, this God. There are three main gods in Hinduism: Shiva, Vishnu, and Brahma. Not Brahman, Brahma. You'll see that, the trinity of gods in Hinduism. Okay? But they're actually the trinity of God's actions. Because Brahma is the creative force, Vishnu is the preserving force, Shiva is the transforming force. So it's really a description of the qualities of God. But it's become personified in Hinduism, in a mythology, in a story, so they take on attributes and a massive storyline. But don't get too caught up in gender yet, because these gods each have a male and female side. Now, the male sides are focused on in this patriarchal world, yes. But they each have consorts. Brahma has Saraswati. Vishnu has Lakshmi. Shiva has Parvati. Oh, interesting. Okay. And Hinduism says, well, look, it's all the same thing. Who do you want to relate to? Go for it. Now, another element comes in, which makes it a little more confusing, but very interesting and cool, is a whole different set of thinking at the same time says that, well, you know what? We're going to go with the idea that we're going to back up a step. This personal God, the manifesting principle, we're going to focus on that. And we're going to call it a her. And we're going to focus on that as the primary source of all things, as the goddess, as the divine feminine. Remember, the divine masculine is the Nirguna Brahman in this case, which is interesting, right? It's not an either or still, which we kind of get confused when we think about these things in the modern world. The ancient world focused on the goddess, which is very interesting, from the beginning. But in Hinduism, they still tell you, okay, yes, but they're still acknowledging the divine masculine that actually holds the container as the goddess is manifesting throughout reality. Creating from her womb, right, of creation, literally. And so there's a whole branch in Hinduism that simply focuses on that. It's called Shakti, the divine mother, divine feminine, Shaktiism. So now we're getting a little more tangible. So in Hinduism, you've got these strands now that have evolved. Really there's specifically 4 to 5 primary strands that then have evolved over time, thousands of years, that have kind of become these codified streams. Shakti, divine goddess devotees, followers, traditions, practices. Everything is based on the goddess. That's all there is. There's no God, God is goddess. Right? And that's kind of where my family stems from in India. It's kind of cool. My mother would, when she would pray to God, she would say Ma, or mother. That's what I grew up with. She's calling mother. We would pray to Ma Durga. Very different, right? But you have another stream that focuses on Shiva as God, but who yet has stories and myths, is very humanized. You have the goddess that has stories and myths, very humanized, but is also God. All that is. Everything geared around that. You have another stream on Vishnu as God, but yet also humanized oftentimes. Stories. Brahma is kind of interesting. There is no tradition of Brahma, which is a different rabbit hole. There are no temples to Brahma in India still, at this point. There may be one or so in ruins, but no temples exist to Brahma. No traditions of Brahma, no practices, which is very interesting. So the point is, though, we back up a little bit. The Ishwar, the personal God idea, is this gem from the tree, letting you know, look, this is why arguing over God is pointless. Because we're telling you from the beginning, it doesn't matter. Isn't that refreshing? Yay! I mean, that's what most of us know deep down inside.
Yeah.
Right? But we don't get that on the outside, especially growing up in the Christian world. So, like my mother's altar, most traditional Indian, Hindu women have an altar in their house, which is like their church that they go to every day to pray, connect. Well, on her altar, we had the divine feminine, Durga, and Kali. We had Krishna. Whole sects of India follow Krishna as a form of Vishnu. You see? And that's God. We had Shiva. Remember, whole sections of India follow Shiva as God. We also had Christ sitting there on the altar. We had the Buddha. All of it. And so that's what I would see growing up. Oh yeah, it's all God. That's God. Those are all pictures of God. So that is the basic foundation of Hinduism. This is why you'll hear on YouTube people saying, oh, Hindus believe in like 3 million gods, 300,000 gods, 300 gods. They're just all confused. They don't know what to believe. Well, that means they don't understand what Hinduism is. You see? Because yeah, you walk around India, you're going to see temples and shrines that are different on the same street that you can walk into, each worshiping a different god. And yes, there are idols. Yes, there are idols in Hinduism, which is now fascinating. Which let's pull apart, because that is kind of a big, issue that comes up from a Christian mindset, a Western Christian, Islamic, Judaic mindset. Ooh, they have idols. Bad. Yeah.
So do people tend to pick a stream, or is it circumstantial?
Both.
Okay.
Yeah. Oftentimes it's what you're born into, like with anything else. It's what you're used to, what your family is used to. You just follow. You can change. In the same family, you can have a family deity. Okay? In the same family, each sibling can adopt a different one. It's all good.
It's like archetypal, right? It's like there's certain
Archetypal,
qualities
yes.
you want to call in yourself. You
Yes.
start to worship that God, and
Right.
bring it into you.
Now, I will say, as being humans, of course, within families, yeah, there's going to be dogma as well. They're like, no, you can't worship Krishna. We worship Durga. Don't do that. Sure. I mean, yeah. That's what humans do, right? But the point is, though, Hinduism does not say that. That's the thing. You're free. Within the same family, to even. In your own lifetime, you can change. This time period, I'm going to focus on God as Krishna. Okay, now I'm going to focus on God as the Divine Feminine. Great. Real Hinduism would say, great, that's kind of what you need at that time. What they're saying is you need those archetypal energies to focus on, which gets us back to the idols. So now, the philosophy didn't stop with the personal God. Again, they keep going, which is fascinating. They go, okay, you want a personal God? Great. How are you going to relate to the personal God? You've got choices again. Okay. What's the easiest way to relate to someone? How do you remember someone? The easiest thing. We have a picture, right? We take pictures. To remind you of a friend or a loved one. You look at their picture, especially if they're not around and you can't relate to them. And so they literally describe this. Look, make a picture of God. And what happened then historically, specific pictures were evolved and codified to symbolize God in certain ways, right? That's where these temples come from. And I would say that's where the temples of the entire ancient world came from. Because, to digress for a minute, to add my 2 cents worth, what I want to emphasize, in India, Hinduism as we have it in India, the general philosophy and the system of Hinduism was preeminent throughout the world before the last 2,000 years. That's what's unique. You walk on the land of Greece, you come across all the temples. In Egypt, you've got all these temples. All over the world, you've got shrines and temples. Right? In the indigenous cultures, you don't have some of that so much, especially the North American ones, but you have more of this understanding of God in all things with nature. But you got some of those temples in Mesoamerica and South America, these embodiments of divine figures, or these places to go to connect to divinity, right? And so this idea of, the Greek philosophers would specifically say, look, yeah, we play around with the idea of these Greek gods, but they're not God. Yeah, there are stories of Zeus doing this, Prometheus creating man, and underworld and all this stuff. but they are not the creator of the universe. And you find that thread in the mythologies. They're acknowledging that, maybe not openly in some of the mythologies, but the thread is there, especially if some of the philosophers come in and kind of give their 2 cents worth. Right? This idea. And Gnosticism kind of grew around that because Gnosticism in the West held that intact, which derived a lot from the more ancient Near East Greek-based mystery schools. Right? And that's what they were holding on to, those mystery schools of the ancient world. The mystery schools of Persia, Egypt, Greece, the Celtic Isles, the British Isles, they had the same framework of original Hinduism, is the point. Which there's this preeminent idea of God that is here and now. Right? And the way it's described is imminent, here and now, yet also transcendent, beyond all this. Both. So then, in Hinduism, you've got this idea of how to connect to God in different ways. So you can create the idol, the image, if you want, based on some story you know or some way of framework of understanding. Yeah, just an aside, look, Christians are creating idols all the time. You walk into a Catholic church, what do you see? A cross. Now, Protestants got away from that a little bit, but they create these mental ideas. So, it is just human nature to have an anchor to put your mind around something. And so ancient Hinduism goes, yeah, look, do it. Here's what's going to happen. Have fun. Got lots of choices. But they also said, they didn't stop there. They said, okay, look, you can do that, but that's taking you very, very far away from the true reality of God. Because if you're thinking of God now is this, you've got a name for God now, you've got a form for God, you've got a story, you're going to get really fixated on that. And you might start fighting over that. That's what happens. And they address that. They go, okay, look, if you need to do that, that's fine. You can, there's nothing wrong with it. But if you want to get a little bit closer to the truth here, go within. Find it within yourself. God is there within yourself. Then you have now this other massively beautiful fruit from the tree of Hinduism that we bring in. The practices, or the yogas, the paths to returning home, reconnecting God. Yes?
The on the altar, your mother's altar, the figures, are those considered representations of God, or are they considered idols? I guess it's in my mind. I'm thinking of when does it cross the threshold of becoming an idol, or is that just like symbolism that we use, like you said, to anchor us?
All of it. All of it. This is what becomes very hard when you're from the Hindu mindset. There's no either neither. It's all of it. And that's kind of getting back to, I'll come back to your question, and with what I say next, maybe will help answer it. So, getting back to the practices that they instill, that they laid down and codified over the ages. And you remember, each of these streams have different practices, okay? But they have common elements, of course. Different ways of going within, and different ways of externalizing the practices outwardly, okay? But one of the common themes, interlacing all of it, it's all based on how you are choosing to see and understand God. Now, bringing in now another gem, fruit of Hinduism, is the universal philosophy of it. We talked about how they kind of iterated the versions of God down to what's relatable. Well, what that's based on is the philosophy of how they described why that's so. Okay? And what they mean by that is, if God is everything and all things, you can't not be part of that. But yet, when you're in that, it can look like you're not part of it because you're in it now. When you're in the box, you can't see what's outside the box. So it looks like there's a lot of stuff inside the box, but there's still the totality of the box. And the great metaphors are, of course, right? Every drop in the ocean is part of the ocean, but yet each drop and wave is distinct and separate for a certain time period. Right? Each grain of sand is separate, but yet it's all part of this macrocosm of the beach. And on and on and on, right? We get that. So, the idea of Hinduism, to bring in that philosophy and keeping it intact the whole way, letting you know that, look, the reason we're giving you a choose your own adventure here, and infinite options, because it doesn't matter. It eventually gets you to the same place. It's all the same thing, different manifestations of the one. So if you focus on the man-made creation, humanoid creation that looks like, say, Shiva, as an idol, okay, that will eventually get you to the same place, just like if you're focusing on imagining Shiva inside of yourself in a very focused meditative state, which will get you to the same place if you're simply focusing on the idea of a transcendent being within you. It's always been there, which will get you to the same place if you simply focus on your breath. It's coming and going, always there. Right? The essential Hindu philosophy is everything is non-dual. The idea of non-duality is, it's a common thing now, you see a lot, non-duality, but it's this framework that was intact in Hinduism from the beginning. It's the actual soil the philosophy is based on in Hinduism, the non-dual perspective of all things. And what does that mean? Non-dual means it's not either or. But you can focus on one side or the other and talk about it as if it's either or. You follow? So then what you have now, and the term in Hinduism is Vedanta. This becomes the philosophy of Vedanta in Hinduism. The knowledge of reality is what Vedanta means. And so what they're saying is, reality can be non-dual or dual. Okay. If you want to focus on it non-dual, there's no good and evil. It's all a shade of gray. You can. That is true. Or you can focus on, there's good and evil. Oh yeah, it's really polar. There's polarities. I can feel it, I know it, I've seen it. Okay, you're right, it's true. So Vedanta would say, they're both right. What do you want to focus on? What you focus on will dictate, of course, what you experience. Okay, and so in Hinduism, they outline this specifically. These different traditions will tell you off the bat, okay, look, if you're going to do this, here's what's going to happen. Let's get you ready for that. If you do this, here's what's going to happen. Let's get you ready for that. And so what I mean is, if you go from a non-dual perspective, okay, you don't want to focus on God as a person. You don't want to focus on this God idea as something specific. Okay, you don't have to. In Hinduism, they even give you the out. You don't even have to believe in God. That's an actual philosophy in Hinduism. It's got a term. Because the idea is, it doesn't matter. Directly experience the reality for yourself. That's the central point of Hinduism. That's why it's not dogmatic. Yeah, there are beliefs that you can adopt to help you out and to keep you focused, but the idea is, it doesn't matter. What you experience ultimately will be the same thing for every human, which is a transcendence of consciousness beyond your mind and body. When you experience that, it's the same universally, independent of belief, is the central idea. And what they're talking about is the soul. The Atma, in Hinduism, the soul is called the Atman, A-T-M-A-M-A-N, which is the, and how they describe it, it's the individuation of God as a point, which then goes into creation. It localizes into, and you can describe it so many ways. God localizing into the creation within itself is a soul. If you can imagine that. Each one of us. Who's having an experience now in creation. But because creation is so dense, so intricate and complicated, the Atman gets layered and covered and lost within its own creation. And it doesn't even realize it. Until it does. And that's the journey within Hinduism, the samsara, the cycle of journeying through creation is samsara. And it's described as this cycle of birth and rebirth, birth and rebirth, birth and rebirth in different forms, in different dimensions, again, in different bodies, again and again and again. There's no expiration date. So generally a Hindu is, Hindu is kind of born, it has patience in their genes. If you will, it's there. They may not always, awaken it, but the culture of Hinduism is based on, look, it doesn't matter in this lifetime. You do what you can. Go as far as you can. And there are certain guidelines, of course, in Hinduism, to remember all the guidelines are not based on a specific way of salvation, a specific reward, a specific afterlife. It's none of that. Now, all those can be part of the journey, which is what's interesting. And in Hinduism, the journey of samsara, the journey between bodies, the journey in the afterlife, they describe to you. It can be heavenly for a while. You can be in heaven, sure. You can be in hell, sure. It's not eternal, though. That's the big difference. No. All things end. Burn up the karma. Which gets us, thank you for the segue, gets us into the other central point of the philosophy of the subcontinent of India is karma. Hinduism has it, Buddhism has it, Jainism has it. It's seeped into, even in a lot of Islamic Christian people living in India, they can't escape Hinduism. Hinduism never got colonized, which is very fascinating. The Islamic invasions couldn't take over India fully, right? Even when the British took over India, they couldn't fully, not even close to, instill Christianity in India. Although, the first Christians were in India. St. Thomas was the first one to create his first, I think, church missionary outside of the Near East in India. But the point is, colonizing doesn't work in India. Which is very fascinating because it's all good. And so a missionary comes in like, look, believe in Christ. Go, okay. Then they go home and they still believe in whatever. They come back. Did you pray to Christ? Oh yeah.
Well, Yogananda talks about Christ all the time,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
there's the idea that he was there during the lost years.
Yeah. Don't make me digress, Alicia. That I would end up spending the rest of the hour.
And why is he making mudras in the
Yes.
paintings or anything?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. What was he doing those 40 days and nights in the desert? What do you think he's doing?
Like
He was meditating. You know, he wasn't just sleeping and sitting there or, you know, wandering around, walking around. No, he was meditating, more than likely, which you learned somewhere. But, to a Hindu, you have a choice how you want to relate to the divine. And it's a journey, it's a continuous journey of returning, doing the best you can, trying to burn up, clear as much karma as possible, which is the idea of accountability. There's always cause and effect. Always. We can't escape it. We know this in reality. You do something, there's an effect. And it's in every dimension is the idea of karma. You can't escape it. Every thought, action, word, deed has an effect, which you may see immediate results or later on, or much later on, or next lifetime, or lifetimes from now. Some karmic seed may blossom, which you'll be then forced to experience. Which now explains so much. You know, the idea of karma is intrinsically tied in with reincarnation, of course, right? Rebirth. The idea of returning, having new bodies. So you can't pull them over. They go together. But, and this isn't a talk on reincarnation or karma, but the idea, I have a whole different talk about that, you know, on my YouTube channel, but it helps explain so much. Takes away so much confusion when you start to get the idea of karma and reincarnation, which is so helpful. So, getting back though now, in Hinduism now, again, remember, one of the big jewels are the practices, like I said, okay? The practices that have been codified and written out and explained in detail on the how-to manuals in Hinduism are extraordinary. That's what's so unique. That's usually what's missing in most of the modern day religions. Really how-tos. Besides just, you know, rules and regulations and codes of conduct or rituals that we do, right? Hinduism, you've got that too, right? And so they make a distinction. For the masses, there's the popular version of Hinduism, which you see in the movies, TV, people talk about, people around town, Hindus practicing in the temple. You see a popular version of Hinduism. They gather for a specific reason in honor of a certain deity, usually at a certain time of the year. Very colorful. Someone mentioned color, very colorful, right? It's usually loud, very disorganized. The opposite of church. But it's usually to a certain deity with a priest doing certain things, certain rituals. That's the popular version. And that's usually what's kind of closed off to foreigners. It's kind of hard to kind of get into those circles, of course. That's very cultural, right? It seems very foreign. But the amazing thing is, that's just a part of Hinduism. The popular aspect, the deeper philosophical practices, the philosophy, the ways of looking at reality is open to anyone. That's the thing. And the proof is, that's what's seeped into the West. All of that is what seeped in. It's the beginning of all the gurus and swamis coming over the past 100 years plus from India. Right? From the authentic ones to the inauthentic ones. And they've heavily influenced non-Christian spirituality. Because in America, what do we have for those people who don't want to be part of Christianity? Or Islam, or Judaism, any of the Western religions? What do you have?
Science.
Besides science, if you want to be spiritual, right? If you want to still be, you have this inkling that there's something more and you want to figure it out, but you don't want to go the church route. What do you have? Right? People get into the yoga community. People start diving into the New Age stuff. Right? That's kind of what's out there for the last 30, 40 years in America, really. What is that stuff based on? Of course, all the yoga stuff is based on Hinduism. It is that. Without the popular religious stuff, right? Whether they admit it or not, it is Hinduism. And a lot of the New Age is heavily influenced by Hinduism, by the intermediary of theosophy and some of the mystery traditions, which have a lot of overlap, of course, and that's hard to kind of pull apart sometimes. But these core concepts permeates the New Age. Karma, reincarnation, consciousness in the universe, right? Aliens. Like my last talk was about aliens and spirituality, where I talked about that, right? Aliens is boring news to Hindus in the ancient world, really. It's like, yawn, of course. Why are you so excited about that? We've been talking about this for thousands of years. We know it's real. And, we've got some books about how to connect to them. Do you want to see them? We have books on what they said. Do you want to see them?
You want to talk about subterranean ones?
Yeah. So, what's fascinating is Hinduism has been so mysterious, but it's been so present in the background in our modern day spiritual world.
Very surface though, in a lot of the yoga stuff.
Of course, yoga is very surface, it's there, right? And depending on your yoga teacher or yoga teacher training, they'll get into a certain extent or not. They can do a yoga pose without the original name. If you say the original name of the yoga pose, it gives it away. The Sanskrit name, oh, that's a Hindu Sanskrit.
You're telling me it's not downward facing dog.
Right. But, of course, you can still do yoga without any of the Hindu connotations, of course. Because it is not religious, but it's born from the religion of India. For the purpose of doing something specific to help you in your journey to awaken. Yes?
Well, there's that belief in layers, right? Like, I feel like that's the thing Hinduism has, is bringing spirit or source or God or whatever down into the body, which was omitted from Christianity.
Except in Christ. Right. Christ is the only one in Christianity, right, that is allowed to be God on earth, is what you're saying. And that's a good point. And another gems of Hinduism is, the beautiful fruits of the tree of Hinduism is, because of the idea of God is here and now, which means we are all God. But Hinduism again goes to the next step, says, yes, you're all God, but you don't know it. So don't pretend. That warning is there. Yes, you are all God philosophically. But if you don't act like it, don't say it. because then you're not being authentic. But if you do fully realize you are a spark of God or God, and you're authentic, you will show it. And you will show it this way and this way and this way. Right? And so then you have these numerous characters and figures in Hindu history that were depicting God on earth. Just like Christ. And to the Hindu, yeah, Christ was one of them too. And so the Hindu is like, I'm glad you guys really focus on Christ, because he really embodied what he was saying. Great. And they'll just stop there. And the Christian will go, well, do you want to also, join me and focus on Christ because he's so special? Oh no, I don't have to because I have my own guys. Don't worry, I'm fine. You don't have to worry about me. We're all going to the same place. You can't argue with a Hindu. It's a Hindu who knows what they're saying, you can't argue with them. It just breaks down very quickly. Because there's no winning. The Hindu won't try to win because there is no winning. Because you're like, what are you arguing about? But yes, the idea of the avatar, right? Of course, Avatar has been completely become so many things now in the modern world. From a wonderful TV show, Aang, which my kids are loving right now, to blue-skinned people from a different planet, to these characters on computer games who embody you playing it, right? But the original definition, of course, comes from Hinduism, which is an incarnation of God. Literally. So you are the character that you're playing, that God is playing on earth, but the character knows who they really are. It's kind of weird. It's kind of how we use Avatar, right? In video games, and how even the movie kind of shows, the blue skin Avatar movie kind of shows them, right? They implant their consciousness, they transfer it, but they still are very aware that they're actually not simply from that planet. But yeah, that's where the Avatar idea comes from. And so the idea, in Hinduism, it's infused with, yes, God, personal God, comes to help us. Because we need lots of help, again and again. So God will come and help us again and again. Because the God within you, you're having problems remembering and connecting to. So therefore, God, a form of God who doesn't have any problems remembering, comes to remind us and show us the way. That idea permeates all of Hinduism. And in every one of those streams I mentioned, the goddess-based, the Shiva-based, the Vishnu-based, they each have their different avatars, which makes it even more fun and confusing and intricate. Each one has their avatars. And avatars have their own avatars. Oh, it gets even more complicated. But the practices, so the direct experience within Hinduism is a key element here, because the idea is you can't just think and talk about this stuff. You can't just only try to follow an ethical code that gets you to a certain extent, but you will never truly awaken to who you really are until you reconnect to that inside. And therefore, the vast majority of the mystical side of Hinduism, it's kind of a little bit divorced from the popular side of Hinduism. Because unfortunately, the popular culture doesn't really get into some of the stuff we talked about today, which is kind of what's very like head scratching. Like when I grew up, most of the people around me, in my family, my friends, none of them meditated. Not a single one.
Isn't that kind of like a different place in the path? Like not everybody's seeking moksha.
Yeah.
Soon.
So in their mind, one who meditates means you are really, really serious about the path, and you're never going to get married now and not have kids, and you're going to quit work, and you're going to become a wandering monk. That's in the culture, right? For thousands of years. So guess what? When I started meditating in college, I came home, I would sit on my bed, my mom would walk in, she'd be like, "What are you doing?" She wasn't happy. What would you think? Like she'd be like, "Oh yeah, my son's a Hindu, he's meditating, yay!" No. She was like concerned. What's going on? Her first question? What's her first question? You can't answer.
I know too.
Are you going to get married? She was terrified I wasn't going to get married because I was meditating. That's one of the problems of Hinduism, modern day Hinduism now, right? The popular culture is so separated from the essential elements that we're talking about today, the foundation of it. It's lost. It's one of the problems, big problems. Yeah.
Is that where the idea of like you can choose the householder route, or you can choose the so that you can still have a family, have a job, do that, and then still meditate? Was that what led to that?
And, well, so of course, yes, the ancients knew this was a problem way beforehand, so they planned for it, and they described a framework and path for people to understand in 4 distinct of different stages of life and 4 goals of life. It was part of the understanding as well, right? And so culturally then, they created these stages of life. You're a student in the beginning, then you're a householder after that, working, having a family, creating a house. Then you retire after that. Then you become a sannyasi, one who renounces and gives up everything. You've lived your life. So they created this template.
Yeah.
That is kind of helpful. Live your life, do what you got to do, sow your seeds, fulfill your desires. When you're done, okay, then. Which kind of makes sense. It's kind of common sense, right? But they kind of, look guys, if you follow this, you're going to be fine. Once your kids are big, they've left the house, you've retired from work, now sit and meditate.
Yeah.
Right? And that's culturally what kind of India adopted historically. Okay? But, of course, it doesn't work. For a lot of people, especially in the modern age where spirituality is blooming, right? Things are shifting in the last 100 years plus in the world, where spiritual energies are permeating the planet in different ways. And I'm digressing a little bit, I know, but that has awakened people way before the retirement age, right? And old cultures like India, you start to, problems occur. Like, these seemingly silly problems where your mother is upset you're meditating now. No one practiced yoga when I grew up around me. Right? Weird. But that's the beauty of Hinduism. You don't have to. But the practices, that's what the key element is that kind of separates Hinduism, besides all the stuff I mentioned, from many of the other religions that are still intact now, as we have it now. The practices are missing from most of the modern religions. You have it in certain segments. The Eastern Orthodox, Greek Orthodox still has some meditation. Islam, you find it in Sufism. some of the more heart-based, open meditative practices. But that's about it. But Hinduism has a whole encyclopedia to hand to you, based on your choosing. How do you want to go about doing this? And then those practices then become a central focus for those different paths. And again, Hinduism, again, gives you so many choices. Do you want to focus on your heart? Are you very devotional? Do you just want to focus on love and being kind and just surrendering yourself? Okay, here you go. Follow this. Bhakti, devotion. Most modern day forms of religion, surrendering yourself to God. Here's a way to do it. Here's how. But also with meditation. You still got to infuse meditation with it, is the thing. You just can't pray all day long. You have to focus. Krishna, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, preeminent character in Hinduism, similar to Christ. Bhagavad Gita, the closest thing to the Bible Hinduism has. His body, the information he portrayed thousands of years ago. He said, I am the way. I am God, I am the way. In the story, it's in the context of a story, of course, and who he's talking to asks, he's like doubting, like, how do I know what you're saying is true? I'm doubting everything you're saying. He goes, oh, you are? Let me show you who I am. And in the story, he then gives the character Arjuna, who's doubting him, this magnificent vision of all that is. It kind of like, he induces a psychedelic experience in him, literally, where he blows his mind open, Arjuna's mind, and Krishna shows himself. He says, I am God. This is what it means. I am all that is. Listen to me, I am the way. Who does that sound like?
Jesus.
But yet Krishna then says, you can know me in this way only with one pointed concentration. Boom. What's that mean? It means you just can't believe. Krishna's saying, you've got to focus on me in such a way, in meditation, where it is so powerful and strong that you can merge with me then and know me as you. Is the idea. You follow? So the point is, that's the path of the heart in Hinduism. It's there in each one of those strands. Or Hinduism goes, oh, you don't want to focus on the heart? You're more mind-based? You want to really know? You want to have knowledge? You want to kind of pull apart reality? You want the wisdom path? You got that here. Here you go. Here's how to meditate to do that. Here's how you do that. And, if you've been coming to my satsangs, my take is that's what Buddhism is based on, which came out of Hinduism. It's based on that path. That's why, again, to a Hindu, a Buddhist is a Hindu. But a Buddhist wouldn't say they're a Hindu. No way. But to a Hindu, everyone's Hindu. The entire world is Hindu to a Hindu. So you've got the path of wisdom, path of the heart. Great. Is there anything else? Oh, yeah. You don't want to do that stuff? You want to play with some of the energy in your body? Oh, we got that. You want to play with what we call the Kundalini? Ooh, this magical, fiery energy that is actually a manifestation of divinity within us. Oh, we'll tell you a lot about that, and here's how to work with that. Oh, okay. You've got all of these massive works on Tantra, Kundalini Tantra, that come from Hinduism now. Right? In these works of Tantra, true authentic meaning of Tantra, right? The Hindu and the Buddhist Tantra, they're like brothers and sisters. But of what we have from in modern day West understanding of chakras, energy systems, how to move the energy, it all comes from that. And I will add, a significant different viewpoint comes from Taoism and working with energy. But they were brothers and sisters too, the Tantra and the Taoism of China. Working with the energies in different ways, but similar with different language too. But the Tantra of India and the Taoism of China focused on cultivating the energy within the self to awaken, is the idea. So, in Hinduism, so many paths lead up the mountain. They all get to the same point. Choose your path. And again, you don't want to do that? Oh, okay, we have another option. You don't want to do any of that meditative stuff, I get it. You don't want to you're not into all these practices, I get it. You just want to live, you just kind of want to live like a normal person, but really stay connected. Oh, okay, karma yoga. Here's how you do it. Can you, in every moment, with every thought, word, and deed, whatever you do, can you do it selflessly? Can you do it without expecting anything from it? Whoa. Whoa! Who can do that? Now, of course, we understand that, right? And look, a mother does that. A mother is forced to do that. Fathers too, but more mothers, kind of naturally. So we understand that idea, but that is a practice called karma yoga that anyone can apply to anything. But that's hardcore. I mean, that's a whole practice itself. Technically you don't have to meditate. Technically you don't have to know anything or even philosophize, but literally everything you do in every moment, can you do it without thinking of yourself? Because remember, the whole idea is, in Hinduism, we're giving you ways to unplug and transcend the part of yourselves you're stuck in. Your mind and body. Your thoughts and feelings and sensations. The stuff you're attached to. Here are ways to unplug and transcend that. That's what they gave you, many ways to do that. And the point was, if you can do that, then you will realize yourself who you truly are, which is divine. Because beyond the mind and body, when you get there, like, oh, now I know. This is what Hinduism says. Now I realize I am truly a soul. It's been on a journey, and the nature of the soul is really God. I am part of and am God. Then you can truly say that. And Hinduism says, you'll be qualified to say it once you get there. But yes, you can get there. It is possible. It is a thing. Anyone can, at any time, if you know how, if you cleared your karma. There are a lot of, hoops you have to jump through, of course. But you have all these paths that you can take to get there. How are we doing? Questions? Thoughts? If someone asks you guys, what is Hinduism? Can you answer now?
Everything.
Choose your own adventure.
Yeah, it's a choose your own adventure. Except you get to the same spot, as opposed to different endings.
Can you explain the difference between Hinduism and Sanatan Dharma?
Oh, thank you. Yes, I was going to say that. So, a term before the term Hinduism got applied to all the stuff in India, a term used in the scriptures, the works, and by the people themselves was Sanatana Dharma. So, Sanatana means generally eternal forever. Dharma is generally the truth, the way, how it is, purpose, what you should do. Right? So That's how they described what all of it, Sanatana Dharma, the eternal truth. Just how it is. How it's always been and will be.
It's like the way.
The way.
So that would be like the Taoism.
The way.
Or Christ saying, I'm the way.
Yeah. Same thing. The way. There's only the way. And that's what I mean when I always say universal framework. I use that a lot in my satsangs, right? That's the way. Another term it's common, in the New Age world, in theosophy, perennial wisdom. Who's heard of that? The perennial philosophy. That's a common term that's been used. It means the same thing. Theosophy, that was kind of their tagline. The perennial wisdom. The truth has always been there on the planet. Of what's really going on. That you don't have to argue about or be confused about. Just pick your path and follow it. That's the thing about Hinduism. You gotta pick a path though. Pick a path that you like or are attuned to and follow it. So look, now to make it practical, look, I've described these paths and these ways of looking at God. You can morph it to what you're attuned to is the thing, right? So if you have still like kind of a devotional mindset, you want to pray to God, you want to connect, you want to feel God in your heart, you want to feel this divine presence. Okay, great. In Hinduism, that's bhakti yoga. And Hinduism describes, learn what Hinduism would say. Like, how would you go about doing that? It's about relationship, right? And now I sound like a Christian, right? It's about relationship to God. Forming a relationship. But in Bhakti Yoga, they say there are different relationships you can have, which we kind of like gloss over. And the idea is, in Bhakti Yoga, you start with God as out there, kind of like a parent. God as parent. Kind of how a lot of us growing up in the Christian world, God is Father, or God is Mother, from a Hindu point of view. Okay, you evolve to God as friend. Can you do that? A lot of people can do that. That's kind of a natural trend. God is a close friend, ally, closer to your heart, more, relatable. Okay. Then you get into what gets a little tricky, God as lover. More intimate. Who's read Rumi? Rumi, the great Sufi poet, right?
Yeah.
When you read his stuff, he keeps saying, "Oh beloved, you are near me." He's not talking about a girlfriend or his wife. He's talking about God, right? So Sufism is pure bhakti yoga. He's talking about God as his lover, right? Which is a whole elite level of bhakti yoga, of devotion. Can you do that? And that's what Tantra gets into, Tibetan and Buddhist in Hindu Tantra, when they depict, you see those images of these male and female intertwined in embrace, and they're meditating on them. Same idea. You see? So, God as lover. To eventually, what's the peak of being in love or being a lover? Being at one, right? That feeling of oneness. There you go. The next stage. If you can do God as lover, the next big leap is you and God are one. That's Bhakti Yoga. Right? Now, of course, applying this in a meditative state changes the game. It becomes a massively transformational experience that brings in other elements as well. And that's where Hinduism, again, lets you know, guys, if you want to do this, you can. This is available to you. People have done it for thousands of years, and here's what happens if you do it. It changes the ball game so much that you might start to be worshipped. And so this idea of evolution is inherent in Hinduism, where a human can evolve into more than what they think they are, right? That's another unique aspect that Hinduism holds, that you are not what you think you are, you can change, you can evolve, and you can be like these figures and characters we tell you about, who are like gods walking on the planet. Yeah.
And those paths would be something like Kriya Yoga or Siddha Yoga, where you start developing, because you're doing those techniques, you start developing what you would call magical powers or
Cities.
Yeah, so Kriya Yoga, which is mentioned in Kriya Yoga, Siddha Yoga, anything yoga. Okay, that's the thing. Something and yoga is what's common, right? Is what you're going to see that's related to Hinduism in ancient India. Yoga means path. A path, a way, generally to you're uniting, to yoke. Yoke and yoga come from the same. Yoke comes from yoga, which is to bring together, to yoke, right? So you're a path to bring the self to God is yoga. So, Bhakti Yoga, the path of wisdom, Jnana Yoga, Karma Yoga. She mentioned Kriya Yoga. There are a lot of yogas, just so you know. Okay? But Kriya Yoga, Siddha Yoga are other versions that have specific practices that incorporate different elements. A lot of them overlap. But they incorporate certain elements. Kriya Yoga comes from specific practices you do that work with the Kundalini and the energy. And meditation, right? So, for simplicity, you can think there's Bhakti, path of wisdom, path of devotion, Gyan, path of wisdom, and there's a middle ground, which is called Raja Yoga, the royal path. That's what Krishna talked about. Raja Yoga is now a series of steps that we know in the West as the 8 limbs of yoga. Patanjali's yoga. Right? Ashtanga Yoga. The 8 limbs, yamas, niyamas, which you should do, shouldn't do, asanas, the postures, pranayama, breath work, and then the latter stages, which are all meditation, withdrawing senses, pratyahara, concentration, dharana, meditation itself, dhyana, and samadhi, absorption. Those are all meditation, is the thing, right? So that falls under the body of Raja Yoga, which is a specific recipe to apply either or. You see, you can use Raja Yoga to apply both of these, wisdom or. Applying wisdom would be more like a Buddhist path, more of a Vedanta Advaita path for those who know that. And what wisdom means, you're looking at yourself and seeing what you're not. Simplest way to understand it. You're not your thoughts, you're not your body. And you're meditating with that awareness. You see, that's the path of wisdom. Seeing what you're not. And once you realize what you're not, you realize what you are. Way more than that. The path of bhakti is the opposite. You focus on what's greater, which makes you not focus on yourself, on something greater, until you finally can do it in such a way where your lower self, you're free of it. And you realize what you are. You see, it's getting to the same place, if that makes sense. Okay, it's the easiest way to understand it. So Raja Yoga is a recipe, and you have different recipes now. Kriya Yoga is another version and recipe, which comes from what's called Tantra Yoga, the tantric practices, which Kriya Yoga stems from, and elements of Raja Yoga stem from. But the tantric practices are all of the different ways of meditating to move energy and awaken things and focus in different ways. It falls under the category of Tantra, to kind of simplify it. And of course, the Tantra of the West, which has become a different thing in certain circles, is a small stream coming from that bigger body of work of Tantra by the original manuals and works of the original ancient sages. Make sense? Hopefully it kind of clarifies a lot of some of the buzzwords you come across. But Tantra is very confusing, and that could be a whole topic unto itself. But it's not what you think it is. It's way more than that. And it's a very general term for a general set of practices and a recipe. But within that, you have very subsets of different recipes. It's Tantra. Okay.
Would you say the vast majority of Hindus are more like a surface level Hinduism that's like, you know, they're not looking, like you said, like.
That's what I call the popular Hinduism.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a kind of term for, yeah, the vast majority.
Mm.
Vast majority, they do the ceremonies, they do the rituals, they do the pujas, the ceremonies and gatherings, social events. You know, it's become social. It's, you know, social events, cultural. Get to dress up and eat, and be loud, and you know, see your friends. And all the priest does all the chanting, you know, up there, and you're just kind of hanging out back here, and you don't know what they're saying, and you know, they're chanting in Sanskrit, and you have no idea what they're saying. But if you took the time, yeah, look, before we go, just to give you an idea, in the ancient days, where this comes from, the fire ceremony in the Vedas was a central focus. Okay? Sitting in front of the fire, most ancient human activity, right? Sitting in front of the fire, they would create special formations, altars, and it's called the Yagna ceremony, Y-A-G-N-A in the Vedas. The Yagna ceremony would be the central focus. Create a fire, the priests or the facilitators would sit, and they would use different elements. They would use the 5 elements, representations of it, which you still find in the pujas now. You know, the fire, water, earth, air, and space. The element, they're using representations of those to invoke different energies, is the whole point. Okay? So the puja is, on one hand, the ancient original spell casting, if you will. And also the ancient way of a group of people creating a temporary localized temple to connect to the divine. Do you follow? So there were temples, but there were also these yagna ceremonies that were done with fire and certain priest facilitators who would invoke these elemental energies. They would be chanting to invoke certain energies. The priests would be getting into altered states. It doesn't happen now. But the original point was they would get into altered states, usually meditative states, doing these, and so then what you could imagine, they could draw down these energies, you see, with everything they're doing for the group that's gathered there. And because these ceremonies were focused on different deities who embody certain energies, certain archetypes, attributes, things like that, right? Different times of the year. And so they're channeling, they're acting as conduits and channels to disperse this energy to the public. That was the origin. Now, it's very different. It's a shadow of what it was that you see. It's still very beautiful. You can still tune in if you know how. But the priests are doing rituals now. But they're ancient rituals, you know, using still different elements, which is kind of cool. Water and fire, you know, different foods and substances and things like that. It's elaborate. The mantras all have still meaning, and they're chanting them, but no one knows what they're saying because they're in Sanskrit. It's like those old Latin church ceremonies, right? And they're chanting, and the priest knows what he's saying usually, but it's now only men can do it, generally, priests, you know. Hinduism has a lot of patriarchy that's instilled over the ages, unfortunately. So, they're chanting these mantras. The mantras are powerful, but they're really powerful when you get into that state of consciousness. And most of these people don't know how now. That's the thing. And that's what it is, right? And so that's really popular Hinduism now, the popular culture. Yeah.
Why do you think that was lost? The
Which
ability
part?
to get into that state, or just like the language even?
Well, I mean, that's a complex question. I think part of it is, you know, things change. The world changes. There's, you know, different ages. You know, the idea is Hinduism, you know, in the Kali Yuga, all these things are hard. But they describe in the previous ages, yeah, not only the priest, but the entire public were getting into meditative states, right? Easily and effortlessly while this is happening, right? Even more previous ages, the gods were coming down,
Right.
standing there in the altar. Right? You have all these stories and how they describe it, you know, and therefore now, there's no gods coming down. Temples are either gone in the world, or they become, you know, commercialized in India, generally, or they just become, you know, hollow shells of what they were. You know, my personal take is, you know, these ancient temples. I mean, imagine in the original Parthenon, right? Athena actually appearing, massive being, you know, materializing. And then a time comes when they can't do that anymore for some reason. So humans start creating statues to kind of remember that. These giant statues.
They had to leave because they weren't compatible with the density.
Yeah.
They were.
Probably, yeah. Who knows? So many different reasons. Could be. But what if that's the case? I mean, I love to think this, you know, it makes it fun to think of history this way, right? And so a time comes when now humans have to now recreate these things of what once was. You know, just like the Egyptians had to then start mummifying, right? There's an idea, you know, in some of the more ancient stuff that, well, that's because the humans couldn't go into deep samadhi comatose states of suspended animation, where these gods and beings could, right? And they looked like they were dead, but they really weren't. But once they left, humans kept trying to emulate that and create mummification to preserve the bodies, right? This whole idea. But the point is, like, then we start doing this, then the temples fall under ruin, and they get lost, destroyed. In India, the temples are still there. Other parts of Southeast Asia, you've got temples still, right? But it's only in Hinduism still is the old ways still overlapping with the modern stuff, which is very fascinating. Like, none of it got lost in Hinduism, which is mind-blowing. Everything got overlaid continuously. And they're doing some of the same rituals in some of these temples that was generally being done 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years ago. Think about that. They're still chanting the same mantras that were chanted back then from the Vedas and some of the other older works. Whoa, right? So, this was Hinduism. In a nutshell, massive tree with lots of wonderful fruits to pick from. And you can't go wrong. It's a thing. Pick a fruit, you can't go wrong. Thoughts, questions? Commentary? Was that helpful?
Yeah.
Put a lot of things together,
Yeah.
connect dots, clarify some words. This is why I use a lot of elements of Hinduism as the foundation of kind of what I promote in terms of the universal spirituality. Because there's so many universal elements in essential Hinduism that just, is a wonderful foundation for things. But you got to be able to pull apart the cultural stuff. That's the thing. That's what traps people. If you can pull that apart, kind of look at what's going on beneath the surface, some of the essential philosophy and ways of looking at things, and the practices. It's the thing. You can practice all of this stuff without any dogma or belief system. Especially meditation. You start going within, the same stuff starts happening to everyone, regardless of what you believe. What you believe may flavor some of the stuff you experience, yes. You know, and what's amazing, I'll throw this in as a final, I know it's time, we're past. But as a final example of the beauty of Hinduism, a famous saint, yogi, Ramakrishna, from the last century. He was a real enlightened being in the modern age. A real dude. Real enlightened dude. And he was, his main path was bhakti yoga. He worshipped Kali as the divine feminine, the goddess, the mother. He would sit there and just pray, and he would meditate on her for hours and hours and days. Okay? Until he attained these stages where he realized the truth of things. Okay? But he would talk in the language of, yes, the mother is here, the mother is everywhere. You know, they'd ask him, what do you see? I see the mother. You see me? Yes, I see you. You're the mother. Is she here? Yeah, she's standing right there, and she's there. I can see her everywhere. Like, he's being serious, right? So there was a point then he was like, okay, I'm going to test the different religions out. I'm going to spend a month focusing and meditating on Christ. The next month I'm going to meditate on Allah. Next month I'm going to focus on Shiva. I'm going to see what happens. Now granted, he already got into Samadhi state. He could do that. High level of meditation. And he did. He changed his focus to these different things. And he was like, it's all the same. I got to the same place. It didn't matter. Same reality. Pretty cool, huh? It was such that, you know, when you focused on Christ for a month, he was seeing Christ everywhere. Christ would come to him, talk to him. All right, guys, all done. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Until next month, I'll let you guys know. It'll be on Eventbrite again, and I'll send you guys emails and of other further things. And Alicia is going to be starting a Bhagavad Gita study group, meeting on a consistent basis, in person, right? Where she's going to be going through the Gita and just going over the passages and having discussion and just kind of deep diving into it. So if that's your thing, if you want to do that, she's going to get that going soon, and I'll let you guys know when that's happening. And then Corey's having an event coming up.
Oh, yes, the Yamanjo at the Freemason Lodge downtown, so it's going to be cool.
He's a DJ, one of many things he does.
I'm not playing this one.
Oh, you're not?
No, but
Okay.
I have a bunch of DJs coming for this one. But
Okay.
I'm doing Prana Pulse next week,
Okay,
so that's another one.
yeah.
Send you stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What date is that?
So the next week there's one. I don't know if you guys have heard of Elevation Central. So we do an event there once a month or every other month called Prana Pulse, and that one's like we do like stretching, checking in, like yoga, some